Why don't we have an egalitarianism of sin? You know, to match our egalitarianism of gender.
Is the average church in North America a welcoming place for the average man?
Well, I mean, it depends on what Sunday you walk in, I would say. You know, in my experience, and possibly, you know, I don't necessarily attribute this to nefarious motives. I think people, for example, I think there's a belief on the part of a lot of pastors that men respond to like drill instructor type challenging. So much more aggressive style towards men may not necessarily be intended as hostility to men, but that may just be their theory that like how genders differ in response. And so it's like, I'm gonna try to tear into you like a drill instructor.
Right.
But definitely some of the people, particularly the ones that were most noted for men, like Mark Driscoll, I mean, he used to just go on unbelievable tirades. There was this one "how dare you" rant where he's just screaming and yelling, "How dare you take advantage of a woman, do this, do that." I read one book, it was called Maelstrom, M-A-L-E, Strum.
Okay.
And it's like, you know, the fall of man has had, you know, globally catastrophic consequences, and describing the history of the world as men killing others. And there's certainly plenty of talk about the ways that men have gone wrong, abandoned their wives, all of these things, which, let's be clear,
some of them do.
Men do bad things. So men are sinners, all men sin. And some men, and it's not just a handful of bad apples, there's a large number of men who do very, very bad things.
Right.
But you see that very, very heavily emphasized, and essentially, when it comes to women, essentially nothing. And to the extent that women's problems are talked about, it's generally in terms of how they've been victimized by men. And so there's very, very little challenge. And so it's what I say, why don't we have an egalitarianism of sin? You know, to match our egalitarianism of gender. Now, where I think a lot of people who talk about this go wrong is they want to try to pin the blame on women. So especially a man who's been through like a bad divorce or something, you know, there are a lot of people who are very, very, very embittered and who are very vocal about it. And so I think we'd be careful about going the other direction.
So we don't want to react in the MGTOW, men going their own way direction, where on the one hand we've had this movement where men are the problem, women are pure and holy, and you can't criticize them. And this is an overreaction. I think Luther once talked about the drunk who falls off one side of the horse and next time makes sure to fall off the other side just to keep it even. The scriptural teaching is that in the book of Ephesians, you have the Apostle Paul saying, children, here are your temptations. Men, husbands, here are your temptations. Or in Colossians, he says, husbands, don't be bitter against your wives. He's naming particular classes of people who are going to have particular challenges. And that's notably absent from the church today. That's so women are oftentimes left without any kind of pastoral care. Even if you had a pastor who really loved the men and who was trying to help them, he's at liberty to critique them.
Right.
He's at liberty to address pornography from the pulpit. He's at liberty to address watching the game and having one beer too many. He can talk about that.
Right.
He couldn't talk about anything comparable to the ladies.